All right. One of the things in my work is that I have the opportunity to do a lot of harassment and discrimination training. In fact, I was harassing my assistant the other day. No, wow, that came out wrong. Okay. But we were chatting the other day, and I said to her, you know, I'm in the speakers bureau for SHRM, and I said, I don't know why am I not listed for harassment and discrimination training? And we were going back and forth, and she's like, I have no idea. I said, you need to figure that out. And then she called out the next day. I don't know what that means. But this is one of those slides that is always very interesting as part of training, and here's why. Take a look at the picture for me. Who's blind? Who's deaf? Who's bipolar? Friends, this is why we all have a job. Because there are so many things that we don't necessarily know. Like our first case today, out of the Western District of Tennessee. And, you know, sometimes you just can't make this stuff up. So here we have a case. And by the way, I know the only thing better, by the way, than my world and the acronyms that I have is being a volunteer for SHRM. Any organization you have to go to, and when you go to the VLRC, in order to figure out what everything means, you have to go to the glossary. You know there are a lot of acronyms. But for the ADA, you know, the shifting issues here are kind of simple, right? We have an individual who has PTSD, a veteran, who goes to work for a hospitality organization. And when you start in this particular organization, what you do is, shockingly, you start on the night shift. And the way the deal works, you got to work at least 6 months before you can go do something else or apply for something else. Only she has this issue with going and being at work at night, and it's triggering her PTSD. And so there's this concern around, well, how do we do this? I'm not really sure. And trying to go to her bosses and saying, listen, I've got this problem. It's making me really anxious. I don't really know what to do, but I can't do this shift. And they're turning to her and saying, listen, when we hired you, you knew what the obligations were. Can you do the essential functions of the job with or without an accommodation? Well, I can't work this shift. We're like, well, wait, we have an issue here because at the end of the day, I can't just jump over other people just because you're the only individual who has this challenge. So ultimately, they let her go. Shockingly, she files suit. Look, everybody has to work. Come on now. And here's what happens. The court takes a look at it, and they're like, listen, there's enough here where what could you have done, employer, in and around the issues that she clearly had and told you about. This is by far one of the biggest nightmares that everybody has to deal with, right? Because like the slide I showed you before, which is exactly why I use that picture in training, you don't know when you first look at somebody that whether they have PTSD, anxiety. I mean, we all now, thankfully, if there's any positive of COVID, if that's possible, the fact that we're actually legitimately talking about mental health is a good thing. Same kind of deal here. Now, here's the challenge. And by the way, the one thing that you'll find from me, I'm not here to just spit out facts to you. To me, that's completely boring and besides the point. You want to know, what do I do with this case, Lewis? Who cares? Here's why you care, all right? Her whole complaint was, I can't sleep. I've got all this anxiety because you've got me on this shift. The employer never sat down, never had this whole conversation. Let's talk about what your sleep pattern is. That's not my problem. It happens for you outside of work, not my deal. But they never engaged in the interactive process. They have to take that time. You know what the problem is? I am preaching to the choir, ladies and gentlemen, and I know it. Now, that's two things. One, job security for you, and it means for me, the egg timer will keep right on moving. But it also means there's a level of education we have got to get through to people that they don't necessarily get.